Okay.
So today we're going to look at verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Again, I think most of you have heard of that. By the way, how healthy is your heart? It's ironic and sad that much of the deaths of the number one killer in America, heart disease, could be prevented with some simple exercise and diet, doctors tell us. Also, stress is devastating, and it could affect and does affect our physical health. May I again remind you that the experts tell us that prayer and meditation lower stress. And so don't just practice it here. While Mike is playing, we're looking at these. I suggest take some time each day for prayer and meditation, Bible study. But Jesus was not speaking about the physical organ of the heart here. And just like in our culture, in Jesus' culture, heart had a symbolic meaning. Heart is a metaphor for many things. For example, in our culture, as an emoji, it generally means to like someone or something. By the way, there's some advice for some healthy diets. Heart healthy. Those are some of the things that we're told can help us. Notice even rhythmic breathing or meditation. And so in our culture, these have to be interpreted, right? I guess if you get the one on the far left, it's probably not too hard to interpret. The one in the middle, I'm not sure to do what the one on the far right means, but it means something, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be, even in our culture, it has to be interpreted. So it would begin with, who sent me this? And what's the context of our relationship, things of that nature. So heart as a metaphor can mean several things depending on the context, even in our culture. For example, if a coach says before a game, you got to have heart, the team knows it's a reference to effort, toughness, perseverance, especially when things get tough or aren't going well in the game. If I say Mary Alice Lillenberg had a great heart, those of us who were blessed enough to know her know I wasn't referring to the fact that she could run for miles. we understand that what we all understood, that she had a she was a loving, kind person. Now, when it comes to Jesus' statement in Matthew, how valuable to God are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. I think this verse has been greatly misunderstood in our modern culture. So here's where the confusion begins. We know how metaphors have to be interpreted. I was just talking about that. In a specific context. And they are not to be taken literally. But can we assume Jesus' culture used heart the same way we do? I don't think so. So before assuming this, we need to ask, what did heart mean in Jesus' time? Now, by the way, we also find that later Christian ideas and doctrines are going to further complicate or confuse this statement, blessed are the pure in heart. So, first of all, what did the heart symbolize in the biblical world? Well, notice a couple of statements that Jesus made. From within, out of one's heart, comes evil thoughts. He says in Mark, the 7th chapter. Jesus also said, love the Lord your God with all your heart. in Matthew 23. Now, by the way, is Jesus talking about a feeling? Because, when we say heart, we're thinking feeling, romance, and that confuses people. What if I don't have a heartfelt feeling for God? And by the way, I would suggest that you may not have a heartfelt feeling for people that you even love all the time. Heart is used over 1,000 times in the Bible, so it's an important word. The Proverbs says that the Lord looks at our heart. Well, what does it mean if God's looking at our heart again? So I would suggest that in Jesus' culture and in the Bible, heart is actually closer to our modern concept of mind and brain. We think of feeling, even romantic feeling, when we hear heart. That's not what people in Jesus' culture thought of. The heart was a place or a zone of personality, anthropologists would say. So if you knew one's heart, you knew their intentions, their thoughts. So the heart is the seat of the mind in that culture, or we would say brain. Evil in one's heart is evil thoughts, not just evil feelings. Evil deeds express what's in your heart for that culture, or what's in your mind. Remember that? Some of you old enough to remember that? Yeah. There's no, this was humorous, we all appreciated Flip. There is no devil made me do it. We are capable of having our own evil thoughts, acting on them, evil deeds, which originate in the heart or the brain for us. And remember, in our three-part brain, the old reptilian brain that we talked about, motivated by fear, by greed, and by anger. We have to allow ourselves to get above that, to go to the upper level brain, to avoid these evil inclinations often. So, by the way, the upper level brain can also devise bad things. But the brain can also decide for good. It can decide to act in loving kindness or act out of mercy. So if we go back to Jesus' teaching, we might easily translate, God values those with pure or good intentions for others. I think that might be a best way to think of this. God values those with pure or good intentions for others. Summarized here as blessed are the pure in heart. So, using our brains or our minds to think about or intend to do something good for someone else in advance. By the way, that's basically the interpretation of agape in the Bible. Intending to do good for someone in advance. That's what God did for us. He intended to do something good for us in advance. Agape, love. So, look at our intentions. We are able to see the heart of God because of what He did for us. We know God's heart. There should be no question. God doesn't want to question where He's at with us. We know that. A lot of people, feel that, God is upset with me. Or I wonder what God, if God is angry with me. We know the heart of God. He has demonstrated it. Or the mind of God, we could put it. He's demonstrated that to us in Christ. And that's a good thing. So many have jacked up this verse by assuming that the pure in heart refers to the person who doesn't have any impure sexual thoughts. That's what most people hear. When they hear the pure in heart, they think an evil thought, and especially sexual impure thoughts. That's where most people go when they hear this verse. Remember Jimmy Carter, former President Carter. Remember, he confessed to the whole world. He had sinned in his heart. He sinned in his heart.
Yeah.
Now, automatically, that meant, and he went on to explain what that meant, he had lusted for a woman. And he felt very guilty about it. Now, excuse me, but coming from the Baptist tradition, that's basically what he was taught. Pure in heart means you don't have any evil thoughts, especially sexual thoughts of lust.
Yep.
Now, Jimmy Carter apparently never acted on those, but he still felt guilty about it. I don't think that's what Jesus was talking about at all. Remember, I've told you, according to the Pew study, young people, one of the major reasons young people are not going to even evangelical churches anymore is they say, it looks like all the church cares about is my sex life.
That's true.
I don't think that's what Jesus meant here. This later Christian obsession with sex distorts a lot of things, especially in Jesus and Paul's teaching about God's mercy, grace, and love. How can there be a God of grace, mercy, and love if somebody has an immoral thought, they automatically have to feel guilty? That's not what Jesus was talking about. Now, by the way, I'm not trying to undermine or mitigate sexual immorality here. I don't think that Jesus would approve of that. But I don't think, again, that was the point he's trying to make. If you have an immoral sexual thought, I think we are, from the reptilian brain, we are to immediately resist it and go to higher levels. Okay? That's what we're called to. Don't act on it. But you don't have to feel guilty about it if there is that, especially living in a highly sexualized culture like ours.
Yep.
But biblical faith is the result of higher brain activity. Higher brain activity, not lower brain. So fight the lower desires, the bad thoughts, and move on with God's grace. So let me close with an example of what I think Jesus is saying. I told a story last week about the Gallagher family again, in Ron's parking exhibition, and his dad forgiving. When Alan, after playing pro football, he married a young woman named Debbie, and they moved to her part of the world in New Mexico. So in the off season, he was living in New Mexico and going to a big church there. He already was evidencing some health problems. He was having dizzy spells. He was telling me he had terrible headaches. He had to take the medication the team was giving him for his headaches. He had atrophied. As you know, Alan was a huge man, and I saw him 2 weeks before he died, and I could tell he had atrophied, and I knew something was seriously wrong. So while he knew there was something seriously wrong with him, something happened in that church there. A family, Bill and Martha had a large family. Their son went into the service, and he was stationed at Camp Pendleton. He was 18 years old. In fact, I had met him once when I went back there to speak to the church. Great young man. He was driving back to base. It had been raining. He was in a sports car with his friend. The car flipped, landed on the roof. He couldn't get out, and he drowned. So they had the funeral. By the way, Alan told me, he says, hey, by the way, in case you talk to Bill and Martha, I sent a bouquet of flowers in your name. I go, hey, thanks, man. So Alan heard that Bill and Martha
Good friend.
couldn't get to sleep at night. You know, they lost their oldest son. So, now by the way, I heard this at Alan's funeral from Bill, the father. He said, you know, Alan heard that we weren't sleeping. I don't know who told him. He says, one night about 9 o'clock, I hear all this commotion out in the kitchen. The kids are laughing and yelling, and you know, and pretty soon, Alan steps in the bedroom. This comes right in our bedroom. He says, Mary and I were in bed. He joked around a little bit. Then he pulled out his Bible, or had a Bible, sat on the edge of our bed, and read the Bible to us until we fell asleep. He came back the next night, did the same thing. He came back the next night. He came back 2 weeks in a row, every night. Sat there on the edge of our bed and read the Bible until we fell asleep. Now, that's being pure in heart.
Yeah.
That's good intentions thought out for somebody else. And there's another part of this verse, and you will see God. Well, I think Bill and Mary saw God in the pit of their misery, but I think Alan also saw God and how they responded to this act of pure heart. Amen. Blessed are the pure in heart, because if you're pure in heart, you'll see God in this life as you see how God through you touches somebody else.
Amen.
True.